Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we find ourselves back in time to the year 1015, where the land of Kiev and Rus, which was an Eastern European kingdom from the late 9th to the mid-13th century, is in turmoil following the death of Vladimir the Great. You'll be one of the several potential successors to the throne, and although deploying your troops for warfare seems to be the easiest path to success, the people value a ruler who leads well in a variety of endeavors. Rurik, Dawn of Kiev is a Euro-style realm-building game featuring area control, resource management, and a new mechanic called auction programming. It's for 1 to 4 players, takes 30 minutes per player to play, for ages 13 and up, and published by Peacekeeper Games. Today we'll be doing a rule school, where I'll teach you how to play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now I've placed timestamps below me in the description of this video, just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Without further ado, let's get started. Rurik, Dawn of Kiev is a Euro-style realm-building game for 1 to 4 players, where you'll be one of these leaders leading troops to try to take over the empty throne left by Vladimir the Great. You'll be trying to rule different regions by having more troops than other players. You'll be building structures like churches, markets, and strongholds, which will give you special abilities, and if they're adjacent, they'll get you big points in the end. You'll also be taxing regions to get goods, because you'll be getting money for filling up columns of goods in your boats, but you'll also be getting points for how many you have. And you'll also be attacking opponents' troops to move up a warfare track to give you points. You'll also have a secret agenda that you'll select, and you'll be able to gain points if you fulfill. The 6 main actions are driven by a new mechanism called auction programming, where for these different actions you'll get to do more of them the higher you are on the column. The advisors at the top with the more powerful numbers will get to do more actions, but the ones at the bottom with the lower numbers have a faster initiative and will be able to go before the other ones. And over 4 rounds you're trying to get the most points by moving up these different tracks. To set up, first you'll take this game board and you'll place it in the middle of the table. On one side of the board, you'll place this claim board. On the other side of the board, you'll place this strategy board. Now this board is double-sided. You're going to want to make sure you're using this side for the right amount of players. This side's for 3 or 4 players. We're going to play with 4, so we'll put this side up. Next, you'll find this plastic tray that has all of the goods and the coins in it and place it off to the side. Next, you're going to find all the rebel miniatures. Now, the first time you play this game, you're going to have to take the stickers off this white sticker board, and on the bottom of each of these rebels, you're going to have to randomly place one of those stickers, so it's sort of a hidden thing that is underneath them when they're standing up. Then you'll place one of those rebels in each of the regions on the board. Now, with a 2-player game, you'll only be placing them in these green regions. In a 3-player game, you'll be doing it in the green regions and the yellow regions. And if you're playing with 4 players like we are here, you'll place them in all the regions: yellow, green, and the brown ones. If you're playing with less than 4 players, the regions that don't get rebels, those extra rebels will get placed back in the box without looking at what's on the bottom of them. Then for each region that's in play, you're going to place a good in the region that's shown there. And again, doing this for every region that you're playing with in this game. Then just to the right of the strategy board, you're going to find these scheme cards that have this on the back sides of them. You're going to shuffle that deck up and split it up into 2 equal decks, and leaving a spot in between those for a discard pile. Next, above the claim board, you're going to take the deed cards that look like that on the back side. You're going to shuffle them up and put 3 of them face up next to it like that. Next, each player is going to take 1 of these household mats. Now they have some different art at the top, but essentially they all work the same, and you're going to want to make sure they're in this vertical orientation, because the other side has it in horizontal, and this is used for the solo game. So take any one of these and put it in front of you. And the solo rules are explained fully towards the end of this video. Now once you've selected your board, you're going to take 3 coins and place them on the docks of your household mat, and you're going to take these 2 different conversion tokens and place them up top like this. Each player will then select a color, and they're going to take all the pieces of that color and place it in front of them. Then at the bottom of the claim board, each player is going to put 1 of each of their claim markers that look like this underneath 1 of each of these 3 columns. I just stacked them up, but you can put them below it if you like. Over here, each player is also going to place 1 of their sorted warfare markers underneath the warfare track. Now the first time you play, you'll find these larger cards. There's 3 different types of cards. One whole stack of these cards are for the solo game that has these icons in the upper right. There's many of these bluer rebellion cards and this leader card here. These ones you can remove because these are only used in the solo game. The round summary cards, you can give one to each player, and then each player is going to look through these and take a specific leader card. And these leader cards give you some self-explanatory special abilities throughout the game. Now you can also assign that leader randomly, but once you have one, take the miniature that matches the art there, and then take your plastic base of your color and place it on the bottom of that miniature. And now when Agatha's on the board, everyone knows it belongs to the white player. Any leader cards not selected can be placed back in the box. Next, at the lower left-hand side of the board, you're going to find the round marker, and you're going to place it just over round number 1. Then you'll see these depictions of advisors, with the number 2 and the number 3. If you're playing with 2 or 3 players, each player will place one of their number 2 advisors next to here, it doesn't matter which order they're in, and you'll do the same for your only number 3 advisor. However, if you're playing with 4 players, you'd still place one of your number 2 advisors here, but all of the number 3 advisors of all players get placed back in the box. You won't be using them. Next, you'll find the agenda cards that look like this. You'll shuffle them up and deal 2 secretly to each player. I'm showing you these, but these are in people's hands. Each player is going to look at the 2 cards they have, select one of them to keep, and they'll keep it face down in front of them. This is a goal that they have at the end of the game, like having the most coins or finishing first on the rule track, and it'll give you a certain amount of points at the end if you do that. The card that you don't select, and any cards that were not passed out to anybody, will get placed back in the box without looking at them. Next, you'll determine who knows the most history about Eastern Europe. That player takes this first player marker. They're the first player. Then, starting with that first player going clockwise, each player is going to take one of their troops and they're going to place it in any one region. And each player clockwise will do the same thing, and you'll do this until all players have placed 3 troops. Keep in mind that when you place, it could be just with a rebel, it could be even in spots where you already have 1 troop, and it could be in places that other players' troops are. Then in clockwise order, beginning with the first player, each player places their leader in a region that has at least 1 or more of their troops. The object of the game is to have the most points, and one of the main ways you do that is moving up these different claim tracks. There's a rule track, build track, and trade track. And depending on how far up you move up on those tracks, you'll get a certain amount of points at the end of the game. The rule track, you'll move up as you rule a certain amount of regions. That means having more troops than other players. You'll be moving up the building track as you build buildings in a number of adjacent regions. And then the trade track as you have a different amount of goods on your boats. As you attack other players, you'll also be moving up a warfare track, and first place up on this track will get points, so will second. You'll also score points by fulfilling your secret agenda card that you selected at the beginning of the game, and also by getting deed cards by accomplishing certain things like spending 3 different resources. The game is played over 4 different rounds tracked here at the bottom of the board, and each of these rounds go through 3 different phases. The first phase is the strategy phase, and you're going to use this strategy board, and just like the name suggests, you're going to be setting up your strategy for the next phase of this round as to which actions you're going to be taking. Now, starting with the first player and going clockwise, they're going to be placing their advisors in one of these 6 different columns. And if you remember, the advisors are numbered 1 through 5. Now, when you place an advisor, you can take any one of your advisors, you don't have to go in any specific order, and place it in any one of these columns. Now, if the column is empty, you place it in the top spot. So if I was going to place in muster, I would place it here. I just happen to have selected my number 4. Now, typically you're selecting from many of these columns, but let's say the next player wanted to select this column. Now, if they place an advisor that's a number higher than what's there, they'd move it down. So you're always going to slot it from highest to lowest. Now, if they tried to place the same number or lower, it actually goes beneath it. So the columns are always going to be from highest to lowest there, just like that. Now let's just say the next player wanted to also muster. This is a popular action. They would place the other 2 down like this. And let's say the next player also wanted to muster, and they put a smaller one. It would go underneath those numbers just like this. Now, in reality, this probably wouldn't happen where everyone did this at once, but I wanted to show you how this works. Now, if a column is ever full, you cannot place your advisor there. Now, you can never place an advisor in one of the columns you already have an advisor unless you have an advisor in 3 or more different columns. So in this case, we could place an advisor here because it's in the same column, but I have an advisor in at least 3 or more columns. Now, when placing advisors, you can add bribes. Let's say this red player here is on the tax column, and they're going to be able to do 3 of these actions during the action phase. But this blue player, all they have left is a 3 for their advisor, but they really need to take 3 actions. What they could do is place the advisor, bump this one down, and add coins. So right here we have 1, 2, 3. They can add 3 coins to this bribe, adding 1 for each. So in this case, this makes this a 6, which allowed it to bump this down. Now we talked about how this number is powered during the strategy phase, meaning the higher the power, the higher it is on this column, which is going to give them more actions of that type. But when you go to the next phase, which is the action phase, it's actually going to be resolved from the lower numbers up. So even though you're going to get less actions of that type with the lower numbers, you actually get to go first. So that's sort of a balance between having a lot of power and getting more actions, or having a faster initiative, as it's called, and being able to go first. And since we're talking about that action phase, let's move into it. Once all players have placed all of their advisors, that action phase begins. Starting with the start player and going clockwise, each player is going to resolve their advisor with the best initiative, which means the smallest number. So let's say it looked like this. We're going to move on to the action phase. This phase begins as soon as all players have placed all of their advisors. Now in this action phase, starting with the start player and going clockwise, each player is going to activate their advisor has the best initiative, meaning the lowest number. Also keep in mind when doing this that any coins that were used to bribe were only used to set the power of where they are in the column. The coins do not count for initiative, so this is still an initiative of 3, not 6. So let's say the white player was the first player and they're going to activate this. They'll take this action, they'll take this advisor and place it back in front of them. Now some of these actions you need to spend a coin to do it. So in this case you must spend a coin to take 1 muster action. Now when resolving an advisor, if you do not want to or cannot take the action, then you can forfeit instead and just gain 1 coin from the supply. Now for each muster action that you can take, and those were represented by the number of helmets on that strategy board that was beneath your advisor, you can place 1 troop from your supply, which are in front of you off the board, onto the board. Now you can place them in anywhere you have at least 1 troop. So I could place it here because I already have 1. Maybe I could place it here because I have at least 1. Now it's possible that your leader is actually off the board from being attacked earlier, and when you take a muster action, you can bring that leader back on just like a normal troop. Then each player is going to go clockwise, resolving their number 1 advisor. So let's say it was the blue player. They're doing the move action, and because there's 1 boot icon, they're going to take that action once. And as you can see, as you move up again, there's going to be more actions that you can take of that type. So each of those boot icons we saw was 1 movement point. And for each movement point, you can move any one of your troops to an adjacent region. Now since there was only 1 boot there for the blue player, they get 1 movement point. You get 1 of these movement points for each boot that was underneath your advisor on that strategy board. So for a movement point, you can move any one of your troops to an adjacent region. So 1 movement point might be moving from here to here, or I could even have just moved the leader for that same 1 point. And notice that you can move into or through regions that have opponent troops, and attacking does not happen. Now if you had multiple movement points, let's say you had 2, you could go something like 1, 2, or you could split them up like 1, 2, and you never have to use all the movement points. You can use up to the amount that you can use. So again, each other player in clockwise motion would resolve their number 1 advisor. And once those are resolved, again, starting with that start player and going clockwise, each player will resolve their next advisor, which in this case is going to be the number 2s. And then you move on to the number 3s and so on. Keep in mind, when resolving one that has the bribe on it, the money gets spent and goes back to the supply. It does not go back to that player. But now I'm going to go over these other actions in more detail. When taking the tax action, for each cart icon you have there, you get 1 tax point. 1 tax point allows you to collect a good from a region that you rule. Again, that means you have more troops than anybody else there, so you could spend 1 tax point to get this good. Or you have to spend 2 tax points to collect a good if you do not rule the region. In this case, there is a rebel here, and you're tied with the amount there, so you don't rule this region. You'd have to spend 2 tax points in order to collect this good. Now when you collect a good, you can place it right on your boat with the corresponding icon. Now if those are full, you can place it on your dock. You can have as many things as you want on your dock. And at any time you can move things from your dock to your boat when things open up. Now goods are important because anytime you have a full column at the end of the round, as we'll see in a little bit, you'll be making some money, getting some coins, and it's one of the main ways to score points is having a certain amount of goods in your boat. When taking the build action, each one of these icons gives you 1 build point. Now to build, it costs the same amount of points as the tax points we just went over, meaning if you control a region, it just costs 1 point to build, but if you don't control a region, it costs 2 build points to build. Now when you build into a region, there are 3 possible structures you can build, but each structure can only be in there once, regardless of which players have built them. One of the structures is a market, and if you're in a region that has a market and there's still a good in that region, if you tax, you'll get one extra good of this type. So in this case, if we taxed and our market was there, we'd get this good and another good of that type to place on our docks or in our boats. Or if you didn't want to take an extra good from that market, you can simply take a coin from the supply. Now if you decide to build a stronghold, this counts as one of your troops for the purposes of determining who rules this region. Before this, we did not rule this region because there's one rebel and one of our troops. But if we place this here, this counts as a troop. We now have two, and we now rule this region. The stronghold also has some implications on attacking that we'll go over in just a little bit. If you build a church, you can remove an opponent's troop from this region, giving it back to them, and replacing it with one of the troops from your supply. If you don't happen to have any troops in your supply, you still remove the opponent's troop. Or you can decide to remove a rebel troop. You place this back in the box. Do not look at the bottom of this, just place it back in the box and you'll replace it with your troop from your supply. When taking the attack action, you'll get one attack point for each sword you see there. Each attack point allows you to attack either a rebel or an opponent's troop. If you attack a rebel, you'll take that rebel and you'll place it next to your household mat. Then you'll look at the bottom of this and you'll get a reward. In this case, it's a fish. So we would take a fish from the supply and place it in our boat. If instead of attacking the rebel, you decide to attack the opponent's troop, they will remove one of their troops from that region and place it back in front of them into their supply. Now you can remove a leader of an opponent, but it has to be the last troop of that opponent. And if you attack an opponent, you'll then move up the warfare marker one spot. Reminding you that whoever's in first place on this track at the end of the game will get 3 points, second place will get 1 point. And other players can share the same spots as you, there can be ties. Now when you attack an opponent's troop, you're going to take a certain amount of these scheme cards. You're going to choose one of these piles and you're going to draw a certain amount of these cards depending on a few things. You'll take these cards and you'll flip them up one at a time. If it has this casualty icon on it, you must remove a troop from that region and place it back into your supply. By default, you're going to reveal just one card. You'd reveal one extra card if the opponent ruled that region. And you'd reveal one extra card if your opponent had a stronghold in that region, as we showed when you built in a previous action. Now, even when revealing multiple cards, any card that comes up with casualty, you'll remove your troop and you won't draw any more cards. Now you'll be following this whole procedure that I just showed for each attack point that you're going to spend this turn. Now the last action we haven't talked about is the scheme action. Anytime you see one card, now here of course you have to pay a coin when you take this action, but you'll take one card from either of these two scheme decks and add it to your hand because it shows one card. For this one you'd take two from the same deck, you'll keep one and you'll place one back on the deck. If you pick this one, you'll get to take 3 cards from the top of either of these decks. You have to take them all from the same deck. You'll keep one and you'll place the others back on top of that same deck in any order you choose. And if you take this spot, you also get the first player marker. This is the only way that the player order actually does change in the game. And if anytime any one of these decks runs out, you're going to take the discard pile and both decks, shuffle them together and set up 2 new scheme decks. Well, what do these scheme cards do? Well, in addition to your normal action, you can take a bonus action. You have 3 different types of bonus actions you can take. One of them is to play a scheme card. Now I've just flipped a few up to show you, but most of the time they're going to have some of the different actions that you can take. For example, this is going to give you a coin and you're going to get a build action. This one, you have to spend a coin, but you get to take another attack action. This one, you gain a coin and do a single muster action. If you're using a scheme card that's using the tax or the build action, these actions can stack with the main action. Now this is important because it gives you more opportunities to have that second tax or build point needed to take the action in a region that you don't rule. And some of the scheme cards allow you to take a deed card by showing you this icon, which matches the deed deck here. It allows you to select one of these. Let's say you select one of these cards. By the way, anytime one of these are selected, a new one will come out. And you'd place that deed card next to your household mat. Now accomplishing a deed card is one of the 3 possible bonus actions you can do in your turn. And by doing this, you just simply fulfill this card and accomplish it. In this case, Trade Route says you must spend 3 different resources. So we have a fish, a wood, and some stone here. We can put this back in the supply and we have fulfilled this. You'll then get the benefit of this card, and then you'll slide it just below the deed sign like this underneath your mat there, so you can keep track of the amount of points that you'll be getting at the end of the game. And keep in mind, you can only accomplish deed cards that are in front of you and next to your household mat, not the ones that are over by the deed deck face up. And the back of the rulebook has a deed card reference for each of the cards. The last of the 3 possible bonus actions you can take is to convert goods. You have 2 convert tiles here that tells you what you can convert. In this case, we have honey or fish plus any good, and you can then take a muster action. So in this case, I could put this, and this could be any good, and put it back in the supply, take that action. When you do that, you flip this over because it cannot be used again this round. This one would be wood or stone plus any good to take a build action. Now, each of those 3 bonus actions can be taken once each turn, and you can take them before or after your main action. After all players have taken the actions from all their advisors, you then move to the claim phase. Then each player will possibly be moving up these 3 different columns on the claim track for the rule, build, and trade. For the rule, again, however many regions you currently rule, you'll put this up. So if white ruled 3 regions, they would go here. At the end of the game, this is going to be worth 2 points. And again, ruling means you have more troops than any other opponent and any rebels. And there's no problem with multiple players being at the same level. Now in future rounds, when you look at this, you can still move up, but you can never move down. So if in this round, the blue player had 3 regions, but next round they only have 2, they don't move down, they always stay there. You can only move up. For the build track, you're going to see how many adjacent regions that you have any of the 3 structures. So in this case, the red player has 3 adjacent regions with structures. And on the trade column, you're going to see how many goods you have on your boat. And for example, the blue player has 5 goods on their boat. Next, you're going to earn income. Each player is going to earn a coin for every claim marker and warfare marker that's not yet on the track. So in this case, the blue player is going to get 2 coins, and so will the red player, and so will the orange player. Then each player is going to get a coin for every totally filled in column of goods in their boat on their household mat. So this is going to get them a coin. This one's going to get them a coin. This one will not because they don't have it completely filled. You don't spend these goods for these coins, you just leave them on there and you gain those benefits. Then starting with the current first player, each player chooses 1 D card from this face-up row and places it next to their household mat. Again, anytime one of these is chosen, a new one comes out and refills it immediately. Then each player will refresh any used conversion tokens that they had used earlier in that round from their household mat. Next, you'll place a good in any region that does not have one with the depicted icon there like this. If a region already has a good, you do not place another one. Then you'll move the round tracker down to the next round. If it happens to be moving down to a spot that has a row of advisors, each player will take their advisor into their supply. They'll be able to place it from now on. And when resolving advisors with the same number in the strategy board, you can actually decide which one you do first. At the end of the 4th round, you only adjust the claim board as shown previously, then you go to endgame scoring. Each player is going to score points depending on where they are in each of the tracks on the claim track. And then whoever's highest on the warfare track will get 3 points, second place will get 1 point. If there's a tie for first place, they both get 3 points, but nobody gets anything for second place. Now if there's a tie for second place, first place still gets their 3 points, and all players tied for second place will get the 1 point. Then you'll gain 2 points if you have fulfilled your secret agenda card, and you'll also get points for each of the deed cards that you have accomplished. At that point, whoever has the most points wins. If it's a tie, the player who currently rules the most regions will win. If it's still tied, the one with the most coins will win, and if it's still tied, players will divide the land evenly and share the title of Grand Prince or Princess of Kiev. Now there are a few different variants of the game that you can play. The first one is the alternate board variant. You'll get these tokens, you'll put them face down. You'll include only the ones for the amount of players you're playing with. You'll randomly place 1 in each of the active regions for the player count, and then once they're all on the board, you'll flip them over, and this is the good that this region will supply this game. There's a Rebel Rewards variant. When you attack a rebel, instead of getting a reward from the sticker on the bottom, you can use these Rebel Reward tokens. Put them all face down, and when you attack a rebel, you simply take one of these tokens and you'll get the reward that's on the token. There's also a deed row variant. When the last player in turn order during the claim phase takes a deed card, instead of just revealing the one that was replaced, you actually would discard the ones that are still there, and you'd put 3 new ones out. I'm going to teach you how to set up and play the solo game, but you need to be familiar with the base game, so watch the earlier part of this video with the normal rules first, because many of the rules will also hold true here. Now your solo opponent is going to be the Rebellion. They're going to get this leader with this icon in the upper right of this card, the matching miniature. They're going to get all the pieces from a specific player color, except you're going to remove their troops and you're going to be replacing them with all 15 of the Black Rebellion figures. You'll use the strategy board side with the one player on there, and you're going to use all of these Rebellion cards. They have the sort of blue background with this icon in the upper right. You're going to shuffle that deck and place it just next to the strategy board face up like this. Next, you'll take the household mats and you'll put them in a horizontal orientation just like this. And you'll notice there's difficulty levels, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll select your difficulty and keep that mat in front of you, put the rest in the box. Now this selected mat is the Rebellion's mat that you'll be playing against. You'll take the first player marker and place it in above the column that has the solo icon, which is that red circle with the white axe in the upper left of the column. In this mat, it's the one with the hammer. Take 3 coins and put it on the Rebellion's docks. And on these 6 circles, you're going to place coins on top of those 2. Just like this, and these contain bonuses that can be unlocked. When setting up the board, you won't place a rebel in each region. Instead, you'll place the Rebellion's miniature in Kiev as well as 2 rebels. Then, looking at the card on the top of the Rebellion deck, you look at the first 2 regions that are not Kiev, and you'll place 2 rebels in those locations. So, for example, these 2 locations will have 2 rebels. Then, for the 5 other non-Kiev regions on that same card, you're going to place 1 troop of a color that's not being used in this game. These are considered neutral troops, and I only placed this card here to make it easier for the video, but this would still stay off the board. Then you'll place your 3 troops as normal setup and your leader as normal setup, but you can't place these in any of the 3 regions that have rebels. Next, from the Deed deck, you're going to remove Lawgiver, Enforce Peace, and Grand Hunter out of the game. They're not used in the solo game. And from the Agenda deck, you're going to get rid of Courageous, because that's not used either. Here's some general gameplay differences for you. You're always the first player, regardless of where the first player marker is above the Rebellion's board. And when you attack a Rebellion, resolve the attack as if you attacked an opponent, meaning you do not gain the reward on the bottom of this. Instead, move your marker up the warfare track and then check for casualty as normal. Also, if you attack a neutral troop, you remove this from the board, put it back in the box. You do not get a reward, you don't advance on the warfare track, and you do not check for a casualty. Now let's show you how the Rebellion works in the strategy phase. Note that the first player marker is over this middle axe as its priority for this round. Now in the strategy phase, don't forget you're always the first player, so you'll place an advisor as normal. Now the Rebellion will move by revealing the bottom card of this deck. They're going to move it up and you're going to see here. Here it says an advisor with number 3, but it has a star. The star means this is an advisor that you would unlock from the bottom left side of that game board later in the game. We're not there yet, so we go up here. They're going to place their number 4 advisor. Now, depending on what the priority is for that round, this round it was the hammer here, they're going to go here and go to the build action with their number 4 advisor. So let's say then it was our turn, and let's say we go ahead and place a 4 on the muster action. We then slide this up, and the next one is a star, so it's one of those ones that's not yet unlocked, so we'll move it up 1 more spot. I'm going to place a 2 advisor on the tax action. So here's the tax action. Because it's a 2 and it's lower than the 3, then naturally it just goes below. And then let's say simply I just go to the attack spot for my next turn, and we'll reveal the next row here. They're going to place their number 1 advisor, and it's going to go on the muster section. Now notice that this has a coin next to it. In this case, they're going to be below here, but whenever you see this coin, it means they will attempt to bribe enough money to get to the top. So in this case, this is a 1, this is a 4. This would need to be a 5 in order to push this down, which means they're going to need 4 coins. So if they had 4 coins, they could essentially put those 4 coins here as bribes and push this down like this. But if they did not have the coins, they didn't have 4, they wouldn't bribe at all, and they would just stay just like that. And this is how it might look after we've all placed all 4 of our advisors. Then moving into the action phase, you'll take this bottom card, you'll place it on the top, and now the top part of this card that you couldn't see before is going to basically show you the order of both the locations that they're going to do their actions in and the build order. And remember, we're using this middle column this round for this build order. Now remember, you're always first player, so you're going to take your 1 and then you'll go do those 2 attack. But let's say now it's their turn. So for example, when they take this muster action, they're going to get 2 muster points, and they're going to go in this location order from top row left to right and then bottom row left to right using these points. So looking this from left to right in the top row, they're going to muster one troop in each of these regions that they occupy but do not rule. So in this case, they occupy this region, but they don't rule it. And so we would do this first. They would add one muster there, so now they rule it. Even if they didn't rule it at this point, they still just place one, and then they go to the next region to see if they rule it and if they, they occupy it and rule it, and you keep doing that. Now they do that until they either run out of muster points, or if all of the regions they occupy, they actually rule, like now. Then they start from that first region again, and they add one more. Because they had 2 total muster points, they've only spent 1. Everything is ruled that they occupy, so they would start again at the top of that card, which would be this region, and they would place one more there, and they'd keep doing that in that city order from that card until they have spent all their muster points. And if their leader is ever off the board, they always muster the leader first. Now, if the rebellion were to take a scheme action, they never take a scheme card, and they never do anything with the first player marker when taking this action. Instead, they look at the priority for this round, they take the top coin from that column, they place it in their dock, and this unlocks a bonus for them. Now if it's later in the game and there's no coins left, then you take the top coin from the leftmost column that can be taken to do this. Now what these do are open up new bonus action possibilities. Now I didn't mention this earlier, but when they took the muster action, they were going to be able to take another muster action. And regardless of the current priority, if they take an attack action, they take an additional one. If they take a move, they get an additional one. If they take a build, they get an additional one, regardless of the current priority. Now speaking of moving, if the rebellion's taking a move action, for each point, they move one of their troops to any region. It doesn't have to be adjacent like you. And depending on the priority of where this marker is, tells you how they move. If the priority is on the hammer or the cart here, they move their troops to a single location in this location order that they don't yet rule until all movement points are spent. But if the priority was this one, they actually move one troop at a time to each region that they do not even occupy in this location order from top to bottom, left to right, until they occupy all regions or all movement points are spent. Now when moving, they always leave at least one rebel in a specific region that they're leaving. They'd never leave a region that would be giving you the ruling of that region. However, they will move out to allow it to be a tie. They're always moving from the closest region with an available troop, and if it's tied, they move from a troop from the region that's lowest in the location order. And they always move their leader if there's a choice of which troop to move from a region. Now when attacking, if they're in this priority, they'll attack regions that they do not rule in location order, and then they'll continue to attack in regions that they rule in location order up until all their points are spent. And if the priority is either here or here, it's the opposite. They first attack in regions that they rule in location order, and then in regions that they do not rule in location order. And when they do attack, if they have a choice between a neutral troop and your troop, they always attack you first. And they'll always use all their attacks, if possible, in a single region before attacking in other regions. Now if they do attack you, you remove your troop, put it in front of you as normal. They would then move up the warfare track as normal, and they would check for casualties as normal. If the rebellion attacks a neutral troop, you just take this, put it back in the box, and nothing else happens. They do not advance the warfare marker, and they do not check for casualty. Now when building, they're typically going to build in the order of this build order, depending on which column the priority is for that round. And they'll first attempt to build in regions that they rule, but do not have any structures like this one. And of course, it will always go in location order. If they still have points left, they'll do this again in regions that they do not rule and don't have any structures. If they still have building points, they'll do so in regions that they rule that also have yourself and or a neutral troop there, and places that they already have structures. Now, anytime they're building where there's yourself and or a neutral troop, they'll always try to build a church first if possible, but if there's already one there, they'll go top down in the build order for that specific round. And lastly, if they still have build points, they'll do it in regions that they rule and that also have one of their structures there, and they do it in location order. Now when taking the tax action, they'll do so in this specific order. First, they'll do it with regions that they rule that produce goods for which they do not have a full boat column, and they'll do this in location order. If they still have tax points, they'll do it in regions that they do not rule, that produce goods for which they do not have a full column in location order. If they still have taxing points, they'll do it in regions that they rule in location order that they already have a full column of goods in their boat, and they always put goods to fill their boats. They never put them on the docks. And if they still have taxing points, they'll do it in regions that they do not rule that produce goods for which they have a full boat column. And if the rebellion's ever taking goods from a spot where they have a market, they always take the extra good, they never take the coin. Now in the claim phase, you're going to assign the priority for the next round. You'll place it here if you occupy more regions than the rebellion. Otherwise, you'll place it here if you have more structures in adjacent regions than the rebellion. Or you'll place it here if you have more goods on your boat than the rebellion. Otherwise, you'd assign it to the priority spot that has this marker, which in this case is in the middle. Then you'd advance the claim tracks as normal. Then you would remove the top coin in the priority column for each claim track that you were higher than the rebellion. In this case, we were higher than them in 2 spots. Now these are already gone, and when that's the case, you take the ones from the left starting from the top. So this one would come, and then this one would come because it's the furthest left column, and you start from the top since we were ahead of them by 2 tracks. Then the rebellion will earn income. They'll gain 1 coin by default, plus 1 coin for each column in their boat that is completely filled. Now, even though you'll take a deed card as normal, the rebellion never takes a deed card. At the end of the game, you score points as normal. The rebellion scores points as follows. They never score points for agendas or deeds, but they do get normal scoring for the claim tracks and the warfare track. They then get 1 point for every 3 coins, rounded up. In this case, they have 6 coins, so they get 2 more points. And then the goods on the dock, 1 victory point for every 3 goods on their dock, not on their boat. And whoever has the most points is the winner. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Rurik, Dawn of Kiev, and get to the fun quicker than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, I've placed a link below me in the description of this video, and that's the best place to ask them since I'll be notified, but so will Peacekeeper Games.